Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something delicate. Have you ever been lying next to someone you love, and yet you felt like a stranger? Her body is there, warm, familiar, but something has changed. The way she turns away before falling asleep. The way she suddenly forgets to kiss you good morning. The way her eyes avoid yours when she laughs too hard at someone else's joke. Infidelity doesn't always walk in with lipstick on a collar or a hotel receipt in a jacket pocket. Sometimes it slips in through the cracks of silence, and it hides in plain sight, in a single sentence, delivered so casually it makes your stomach twist because it doesn't sound like her anymore. Today we're going to explore one sentence, one line that might seem ordinary, until it echoes through your chest like a warning bell. If you've ever felt your gut trying to tell you something, but didn't know how to listen, if you've ever wanted to understand not just whether she's cheated, but what changed before she did, then stay with me, because you deserve to understand the language of emotional distance, the one that speaks before betrayal even begins. So let's begin this conversation with courage. And I'll meet you where it hurts, but I'll walk you toward where it heals. Let me take you back for a moment. Imagine you're sitting at dinner with the woman you've loved for years. Maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's the girlfriend you thought would be forever. The wine's open. The food smells like comfort. You're talking, but she's only half listening. Her smile is late. Her eyes flicker toward the door, her phone, the kitchen, anywhere but you. And then between the salad and the silence, she says it, that sentence. I just need space to find myself again. Or maybe it's, I feel like we've grown apart. You don't really know me anymore. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. And just like that, you feel the floor shift beneath your feet. It's not the sentence itself, it's the timing, the tone, the way it drops like a stone into a conversation you didn't realize was even about to sink. So let's talk about that sentence. Because you've asked me before, how do I know if she's been unfaithful? How do I know if she crossed that line and didn't tell me? Infidelity doesn't always scream. Sometimes it sighs. Sometimes it pretends to be self-help. Sometimes it disguises itself as a woman just wanting clarity. But what it almost never does is come without warning. The warning just doesn't always sound like what you expect. If you're over 30, chances are you've already learned that love in real life is messier than love in movies. You've figured out that relationships aren't built on date nights or vacations. They're built in the quiet moments, in how you fight, in how you reconnect, in how you forgive. But what no one prepares you for is what to do when the person you love changes language on you, when her words don't match the woman you fell in love with, and when one sentence becomes the symptom of something much deeper, not just cheating, but emotional departure. Let me be clear, hearing her say, I need to find myself, doesn't guarantee infidelity. But what it does do is whisper to you, I have started to exist somewhere you're not invited. And that's the red flag we're going to talk about today. Let's begin with something subtle, how she shifts her emotional center away from you. Remember how she used to come to you with her fears. When her world got overwhelming, she turned toward you, not away from you. But now, her confessions feel like press releases, carefully managed, edited, detached. You don't hear the trembling behind her voice anymore because she doesn't let it reach you. She's telling someone else now. Maybe a friend, maybe someone at work, maybe someone whose messages light up her face the way your touch used to. She says she's confused, that she doesn't know what she wants. But look closer. People who are confused usually look lost. She looks decided, she looks rehearsed. And that's the first sign. The sentence comes not from a place of searching, but from having already arrived somewhere else. Emotionally, mentally, sometimes physically. When a woman says she needs space, she might be telling the truth, but sometimes she's also building a runway. Space in that context doesn't mean she wants to sit alone and meditate. It means she's already been somewhere else, in her mind, in her fantasies, or in someone else's arms. And now she's making the transition formal. There's another version of this sentence, one that's even more dangerous because it comes wrapped in guilt. You deserve better. That one, my friend, is not humility. It's a soft escape. It's a woman who has already crossed an emotional boundary and is now trying to relieve herself of accountability by promoting you to sainthood. When she says, you deserve better, what she really means is, I can't give you what I used to because my devotion now lives elsewhere. Maybe not fully, maybe not permanently, but enough to make her feel like an imposter in your love. Now, I want to pause here and say something important. Betrayal doesn't always start in the bedroom. It starts with secrecy. It starts with tiny withholdings. It starts with someone else making her feel understood in a way you used to, but haven't in a long time. And I'm not saying that's your fault, but I am saying emotional hunger rarely starves in silence. It usually starts looking for something to feed it. The sentence, whichever version she uses, usually arrives with a new sense of self. She starts dressing differently, reading new books, listening to podcasts you've never heard of. She uses phrases you've never heard her say before. It's like you're watching her become someone new. But it feels like you weren't invited to her evolution. When you ask her what's going on, she says things like, why are you being paranoid? Can't I change without it being about you? I just want to feel alive again. Now, I know it's tempting to hold on, to believe her when she says it's not about someone else, to tell yourself it's a phase, a crisis, a rough patch. But I want you to listen, not just to what she's saying, but how she's saying it. There's a difference between a woman who's confused and a woman who's conflicted. A woman who's confused wants answers. A woman who's conflicted is hiding them. Her sentence might be simple, but what it unlocks, if you're brave enough to lean in, is a doorway into her emotional world. And whether or not she's cheated already, it's telling you this: she has emotionally disembarked. So what do? Do you confront her? Do you accuse? Do you beg? You slow down, you breathe. You begin by reconnecting with your own sense of truth. Because this isn't about punishing her, it's about protecting you. When you ignore that sentence, when you pretend it's just a rough day or a bad week, you're not being loving. You're being loyal to your own denial. So here's where we start, by honoring that strange feeling in your gut, the one you've been silencing for weeks, the one that knows something is different, even if you can't prove it. That's not insecurity, that's intuition. And it's trying to save you from investing in a version of the relationship that no longer exists. The hardest part of love isn't holding on. It's recognizing when you're the only one still trying. And if her words no longer match her behavior, if her warmth has turned to careful civility, if her presence has become performance, then it's time to stop looking for signs in her phone and start paying attention to the signs in her language. Because she told you, maybe not directly, maybe not in a confession, but in that sentence, whatever version she used, she told you. There's something uniquely painful about realizing that a sentence can carry more weight than an argument. Because when someone fights with you, there's still connection, still passion, still investment. But when she starts speaking in vague, emotionally polite sentences that leave you with more questions than answers, what she's actually saying is, I've stopped fighting for us. And that's where we need to go next, to the places where sentences become shields, where her language turns from intimacy into subtle self-protection. You see, when a woman has cheated or is on the verge of doing so, she often doesn't start with lies. She starts with partial truths. She says things like, I just need to focus on myself right now, or I've been feeling so overwhelmed. And at face value, you want to respect that. Of course, she deserves her space. Of course, emotional wellness matters. But underneath those phrases, there's a rhythm, a pattern. It's not what she's saying, it's what she's leaving out. You realize she's no longer talking about you too. She's talking about her, in isolation, as if you were no longer part of the story. This is how the emotional distance begins. First, it's the conversations. She talks less, or she talks more, but says nothing that brings you closer. Then, it's her schedule. She's suddenly busy. Long hours at work, unexpected errands, new hobbies that don't include you. The timing becomes too consistent to be accidental and too vague to be questioned. And then comes the hardest part. The moment she stops being curious about you, you start to notice she doesn't ask how your day was. Doesn't follow up when you share something important. Your wins don't light her up anymore. Your pain doesn't move her. It's not that she doesn't care. It's that her emotional energy is being directed somewhere else. Somewhere that gives her the emotional feedback she used to get from you. And if you bring it up, if you say, hey, you seem distant, she gets defensive. That's another sign. Instead of leaning in with concern, she leans away with frustration. She says, why are you making everything about you? Or, can't I have some breathing room? These aren't the words of someone trying to rebuild connection. They're the words of someone managing their own guilt. But let me pause here, because I know how easy it is to spiral when you hear these things. I want to remind you of something. Her shift in energy isn't necessarily your failure. Sometimes people disconnect not because of what you did, but because of where they are. Cheating is often not about lust. It's about validation. It's about rediscovering a lost version of self. And when she says, I feel invisible, or I don't feel like myself anymore, you need to understand she's not just talking about the relationship. She's talking about who she is when she's with you. And if she feels like that version of herself is small, numb, forgotten, she may start seeking a mirror elsewhere, someone who reflects a version of her she misses. And that's where emotional infidelity often begins. Not with sex, but with laughter, with secrets, with shared jokes and late-night messages that feel innocent until they're not. So how do you recognize it when it's not obvious? You pay attention to the way she uses language to justify distance. A woman who's crossed an emotional line will begin to construct a narrative that allows her to feel like she's not the villain. She'll say, I've given so much and gotten so little back, or I lost myself in this relationship. And again, some of that may be true, but when it's used to rationalize disconnection without any effort to reconnect, you're not witnessing healing, you're witnessing exit preparation. That sentence, whatever version she used, wasn't random. It was rehearsed. She said it in her mind 100 times before it reached your ears. She's tested it on a friend. She's rolled it around in her mouth until it didn't taste like betrayal anymore. That's why it sounds calm when it finally comes out. That's why it catches you off guard. You think she's opening up. up. You think you're finally having the conversation, but she's already halfway gone. So what do you do with that? How do you respond when your heart is still invested and hers is already retreating? You resist the urge to prove your worth. Let me say that again because it's crucial. You resist the urge to become performative, to start showing up with grand gestures, to over-explain your love, to ask what you did wrong and how you can fix it. Because if she has truly stepped outside the emotional covenant of your relationship, no amount of convincing will bring her back. Not genuinely, not for long. Instead, you begin to watch with presence. You listen, not to react, but to understand. And you observe, not with paranoia, but with clarity. If she is emotionally unavailable, but physically present, then you are sleeping beside someone who is already grieving the version of your relationship that no longer serves her. And I want to acknowledge the deep grief in that realization, because we often think heartbreak is loud, but sometimes it's quiet. It's found in the way she no longer reaches for your hand, in how she flinches when you try to connect, in the absence of jealousy, which used to mean she cared, in the indifference that follows your efforts to bridge the gap. One of the most painful betrayals is not being cheated on. It's being emotionally abandoned and then gaslit into thinking it's your imagination. You are not imagining it. That sentence she said, the one that made your chest tighten, was a declaration, a subtle one perhaps, but a declaration nonetheless. She is either inviting you into a new version of connection, or she is preparing to leave you behind in the old one. Now, here's something very few people will tell you. Sometimes a woman cheats because she has already mourned the relationship in private, for months, maybe even years. And when she finally steps out, it's not impulsive. It's not a mistake. It's a carefully chosen moment that reflects how long she's been emotionally gone. That's why when you ask her, why didn't you just talk to me? She looks at you with a kind of quiet sadness, because in her mind she did. But the real conversation wasn't with words, it was with distance. And you may have missed it. So if you're here now, trying to piece together the clues, trying to make sense of how a single sentence could unravel so much history, I want you to know it's not your job to carry the entire weight of her discontent, but it is your job to listen to what her language has been trying to tell you. When a woman starts speaking in sentences that center only herself, when she no longer includes you in her vision, her growth, her healing, when the warmth becomes performance and the truth feels edited, she is telling you something vital. And whether or not she has cheated yet, she has created a version of herself that is no longer accountable to the relationship. That is the moment when you stop waiting for clarity and start asking yourself the harder question. Do I want to continue building something with someone who is no longer here? Because the betrayal isn't always in the act. Sometimes the deepest betrayal is in the leaving that happens before the leaving. By the time she speaks that sentence, I need to find myself. I'm not in love with you anymore. You deserve better. She has already built a private world where you no longer have the key. She has wandered in thought, entertained alternate realities, imagined a life without explaining herself to you. That sentence is not the start of her distance. It's the soft landing after a long internal departure. You just weren't given a boarding pass to witness it. You start noticing other things. She's overly kind now. Too measured, compliments you for things she never noticed before, like how you fold the laundry or fix the car. But it doesn't feel like love. It feels like a farewell letter written through behavior, as if she's easing her own guilt by being nice, because she knows what she's no longer giving you emotionally. And here's where the weight hits you. She might not be sorry for the betrayal, because in her mind she already told you it was coming, not with clarity, not with courage, but with that one sentence, that turning point where her truth started spilling between the lines. But you, being loyal, devoted, hopeful, you heard that sentence as an opportunity to fix. You offered solutions. You gave her time. You asked what you could change. And maybe you started walking on eggshells, hoping that if you just gave her enough room, she'd come back on her own. She didn't. Because here's the hard truth we avoid. Not everyone wants to be rescued. Some people want to leave. That sentence was not a cry for help. It was an announcement, polished, practiced. And you, with all your heart, chose to hear it as a challenge. That's not weakness. That's love. That's belief. But it's also denial. So let's be real with each other now. Let's drop the defense. The story you've been telling yourself about how was just a phase, or she's under a lot of pressure. The deeper truth is she's emotionally invested elsewhere, maybe in another person, maybe in her independence, maybe in an imagined life without the gravity of commitment. But wherever it is, it's not here. And the more you hold on to the hope that love will bring her back, the more invisible you become. That is a slow death no man deserves. And if she did cheat, if she already crossed that line and you found evidence, or she confessed, or you simply know, then you're left with the echo of that sentence haunting you. You'll ask yourself, was that the moment it all shifted? And I'll tell you no. That sentence was just the first time she let you feel the shift she'd been living with in secret. When you confront a betrayal, your mind doesn't just break from the pain of what happened. It breaks from the disbelief of what was pretended. You grieve not just the person who left, but the version of her who stayed long enough to lie. And yet, there's still a part of you that wants to understand her, that still loves her, that still wonders, did I push her into this? No, there's no justification for infidelity. There are reasons. Yes, complex, layered reasons that tell us what was missing, what wasn't spoken, what broke down over time. But reasons are not excuses, because cheating isn't an accident, it's a choice. And that sentence, the one she spoke before or after, was her way of choosing herself over truth. That may be human, but it's not heroic. So what do now? You begin the slow, courageous work of coming back to yourself. You stop replaying the moment she said it. You stop imagining how you could have responded differently. Because it wasn't about the response. It was about a rupture long in the making. You reconnect with your own emotional radar. You begin to trust the gut you've been ignoring. You stop apologizing for noticing what's off. Because here's what I've learned: the sentence that breaks your heart today may one day become the sentence that sets you free. It's the moment you realized you were the only one holding the rope, the only one still building a future in your head, the only one trying to repair a bridge that the other person already walked off of. And I know it's painful. I know it's humiliating. I know it makes you question your worth. But betrayal is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a reflection of her inability to honor the intimacy you offered. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you available. And that is something to protect, not to be ashamed of. So here's my invitation to you. If you've heard that sentence, if it's been circling in your head, twisting your gut, waking you up at 2 a.m., don't chase its meaning. Don't try to decode it like a puzzle. Take it for what it was. A declaration of distance, a confession of conflict, a sentence that changed everything. Let that sentence mark your beginning, not your ending. Let it be the moment you stopped abandoning yourself in the name of love. Let it be the shift that brought you home to your own truth. You are not crazy. You are not dramatic. You are not unlovable. You were just loving someone who had already stopped loving with you. So now the question isn't, did she cheat? The question is, why did I stop trusting myself when I felt her change? And from that place, my friend, you rise. You gather your dignity. You speak your own truth, not to shame her, not to win her back, but to realign with the man you forgot you were. A man who listens deeply, who loves honestly, who refuses to share his soul with someone who's already left the room. Let her sentence be hers. And now speak yours. There's a particular ache that lingers after betrayal. It doesn't scream like heartbreak. It doesn't explode like rage. No, this one is quiet. It seeps in when you least expect it. When you're brushing your teeth and you remember the look on her face when she said she needed space. When you're driving home from work and the seat next to you is empty, not just in body, but in history, and you start to wonder, who am I without the version of love I was building my future around? This is where you begin again. But not by dating someone new, not by throwing yourself into distraction or anger or performance. You begin again by walking into the silence she left behind and asking yourself the questions that matter more than, why did she cheat? You ask, what part of me did I abandon trying to keep her? What truths did I suppress because I didn't want to lose her? When did I stop hearing my own voice? You see, men are rarely encouraged to grieve this way. You're told to man up, move on, get over it. But you're not a machine. You're a human being who gave something sacred, your trust, your intimacy, your softness. And when that gift was mishandled, it didn't just bruise your ego, it bruised your spirit. So let's talk about your spirit. That part of you that knew something was off long before the sentence was spoken. That part of you that flinched when her touch changed. That held your breath when her phone lit up at 1 a.m. That quiet inner voice that whispered, this isn't the same woman I fell in love with. You didn't imagine it. You weren't paranoid. You were connected. And maybe no one told you this, but I will. Being emotionally attuned is not weakness. It's strength. It means you have the capacity to love deeply, to sense subtleties, to notice when someone starts hiding behind their words. But when that sensitivity goes unprotected, it becomes a wound. You start to question your instincts. You start to wonder if maybe you were too needy, too intense, too emotional. And slowly, without realizing it, you start negotiating your own truth just to keep the peace. That's how self-worth erodes, not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small compromises. The ones you made every time you accepted her detachment as normal, every time you blamed yourself for her coldness, every time you told yourself, maybe if I just love her better, she'll come back. But love isn't something you perform to win someone's loyalty. Love is what you offer when two people are still choosing each other over and over in honesty. And when that choice is broken, when the emotional contract has been violated, you have every right to stop performing and start protecting. So what does that look like? It looks like reclaiming your voice. Not to shame her, not to make her feel bad, but to speak out loud the things you've buried. It sounds like, I trusted you and I felt you leaving before you admitted it. It sounds like, I silenced my pain because I loved you. It sounds like, I will never again betray myself to keep someone else. That's how you come back from this. Not by pretending you're fine, not by jumping into bed with someone else, but by becoming honest with yourself again. And this is where healing gets messy, because healing doesn't always feel empowering at first. Sometimes it feels like waking up in a house you no longer recognize. You walk around in the memories. You remember where the laughter used to live. You replay conversations and wonder what was real and what was performed. But I want you to hear me clearly. You don't need closure from her to begin healing. You don't need her to admit what she did. You don't need her to feel your pain. You don't even need her to say sorry. Closure is not a door she closes for you. It's the moment you stop knocking. So stop knocking. She told you, with that sentence, she told you who she had become, and you now aware, now awake, get to decide who you become next. Because the danger now isn't her betrayal. The danger is what you might start believing about yourself because of it. So let's rebuild. Start by remembering the version of you that existed before this relationship taught you to mistrust your own worth. Remember the man who dreamed, who laughed, who felt proud in his own skin. The man who didn't second guess his intuition. The man who didn't feel the need to shrink to make someone else stay. He's still there. And maybe you're not ready to fully access him yet. That's okay. Just don't abandon him completely, because the path back to self-worth is not paved with revenge or silence or pretending you're unaffected. It's paved with self-honoring choices. It's saying no when something doesn't feel right. It's choosing people who choose you back. It's learning how to sit in discomfort without betraying your own truth. And eventually it's forgiving yourself, not for loving her, but for staying when you knew it was already over. You see, that's the secret people don't talk about. Sometimes we hold on not because of love, but because we don't know who we are without it. That's what you're learning now. That love, even when lost, does not erase your identity. That betrayal, even when brutal, does not define your future. You are not broken. You are not less of a man. You are simply someone who loved and who must now learn to love again, beginning with yourself. So tonight, when the silence creeps in, don't fill it with noise. Don't distract it away. Sit with it, breathe with it, and whisper to yourself the sentence she never gave you. I will not abandon myself to keep someone who already left. There comes a moment, after the dust has settled and the silence has hardened into something permanent, where you stop hoping for the old version of her to return. You stop waiting for explanations. You stop scrolling through old photos, replaying old text threads, analyzing every smile and every silence. And in that moment you meet yourself again. But this version of you is different. He's quieter, perhaps, but not weaker. He's not searching for approval anymore. He's searching for truth, for clarity, for peace. You see, when a woman tells you, I need to find myself, or I feel like we've drifted, or you deserve better, it's easy to interpret those words as if they define you, as if you failed, as if you were not enough. But what she said was a reflection of where she was, not a judgment on who you are. Maybe she was confused. Maybe she was lost. Maybe she had unmet needs she didn't know how to express. Or maybe, just maybe, she found comfort in a connection that wasn't built on honesty, but on escape. It's not your job to sort that out anymore. Your job now is to return to the mirror, to see what remains after someone leaves you without taking the time to truly say goodbye. And when you look closely, you'll see something remarkable. You're still standing. After the betrayal, after the silence, after the emotional withdrawal, after the lie disguised as a sentence that sounded like self-help, you're still here, still breathing, still capable of trust, of depth, of fierce loyalty. But now, you're wiser. Now, you don't just hear words, you listen to tone, you pay attention to energy, you notice how someone speaks about their needs, whether they invite you in or speak around you. You've learned the difference between someone who needs space to grow with you and someone who needs space to grow away from you. You've learned that language can be a weapon, a mask, a farewell letter delivered in disguise. And most of all, you've learned not to abandon yourself again. That's where healing lives. Not in forgetting, not in forgiving too quickly, but in remembering who you are outside of someone else's affection. Because love that makes you forget yourself is not love. It's a performance, a desperate theater to keep someone beside you, even if they've already emotionally checked out. You don't need to perform anymore. You don't need to audition for someone else's validation. You don't need to hold on to a sentence she said, because you're still trying to figure out what it meant. You know what it meant? It meant I have created an emotional world where you are no longer the center. And instead of owning that truth with courage, I softened it into a phrase that would make me feel less guilty. It meant I left, and I didn't tell you. And now I need a story that lets me leave again, without feeling like the villain. But here's the secret. She doesn't need to be the villain for you to walk away. You don't need a dramatic ending. You don't need more proof. You don't need her to cry and say she regrets it. You just need to choose you. Because here's what I believe. Every man who's been betrayed has the chance to become either bitter or brave. Bitter men armor up, they build walls, they become suspicious, they stop believing in intimacy. Brave men rebuild, slowly, gently, honestly. They take what they've learned and they carry it into the next chapter, not as fear, but as wisdom. You are not defined by the woman who couldn't love you well. You are defined by how you rise after love fails you. And don't let anyone rush your process. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll hear her sentence echo again, and it'll crack something soft inside you. That's okay. That's healing. That's you breaking open instead of breaking down. Eventually her words will lose their grip. They will become a memory instead of a wound. And in their place, you will begin to hear your own voice again. A voice that says, I am worthy of a love that chooses me, not sometimes, not conditionally, not until someone else feels better, but fully, with presence, with integrity. That is what you deserve. That is what you will protect. So when a future woman enters your life and says something like, I need space, or I feel disconnected, you won't panic, you won't spiral. You listen, you'll ask questions, and you'll watch closely, not to catch her in a lie, but to see if she brings you in with honesty or shuts you out with performance. Because now you know the difference. And if she tries to disguise a slow betrayal inside of a vague sentence, you'll recognize the melody. You'll hear the distance in her voice. You'll feel the absence beneath the words, and you will not chase it again. You will not perform again. You will not silence your intuition to keep someone who doesn't want to stay. You will walk slowly, steadily, proudly toward people who speak their truth and still choose love. Toward partners who say hard things with you, not around you. Because now your loyalty includes you. And that is how you reclaim your power. So if you've been holding on to a sentence that broke you, let this be the moment you let it go. Let this be the moment you say, she spoke her truth. And now, I'm speaking mine, and your truth is that you will never again confuse a beautiful sentence with a loving relationship. You will listen not just to what people say, but to what their words are trying to hide. And you will protect your heart with honor, with clarity, and with the kind of love that starts from within. Here's to the brave man you are. Here's to the love that will never make you question your worth again. And here's to the wisdom that came, not from her betrayal, but from your choice to heal anyway. If this video spoke to your heart, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Let someone else reading know that they're not alone, that you've been there, that you've survived it, that you're rising too. Make sure to like the video if it helped you feel seen. Subscribe for more truths about love, trust, and what it really means to hold space for yourself after you've been left behind. And until next time, don't wait for someone else's words to set you free. Speak your own, you're worth that. You always were.